Okay, so today we're going to deep dive into something I think everybody thinks about,
Yeah.
um, and that is happiness.
The pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pursuit of happiness. And you've brought some guiding principles, I guess we could call them,
Yeah.
um, from from your research, and I'm excited to unpack them with you. I feel like we have a little cheat sheet here for a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, sort of a framework for how to think about happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that the first one is stop comparing yourself,
Oh, yeah.
which is easier said than done
Oh,
in
absolutely.
the age of perfectly curated social media feeds.
I know, it's so hard. And one of the sources was citing a study that said that, people that compare themselves constantly are much more prone to anxiety and depression,
Right.
which makes sense because you're always going to come up short to somebody else because we're all wired differently.
Right. And I think it's that comparison is the thief of joy. Have you ever heard that saying?
Yeah, I have heard that.
And I find myself doing it all the time, like especially in my career. I'll see other people's successes and think, oh, I'm not doing enough.
Right. It's so easy to get into that and to look at other people and think, wow, they have it all together or they're so successful. But what you don't see is behind the scenes,
Right.
all the struggles,
Right.
and you're just seeing the highlight reel.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone is running their own race.
Exactly. And running it at their own pace. Some people take longer.
Yeah.
It's like a garden. Some flowers bloom quickly
Right.
and some take a little longer, but they're all beautiful in their own time.
Okay. That's a good visual to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So how do we cultivate our own garden, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, that goes into principle too.
Okay.
Self-care is key.
Oh, self-care. See, when I hear self-care, I kind of like,
What do you think of?
I don't know, like bubble baths and face masks.
Yeah.
And I always think, well, I should be working. I should be doing something.
Well, so one of the sources talked about the importance of restorative self-care.
So it's not necessarily just pampering yourself.
Right.
It's things like setting boundaries,
Okay.
learning to say no, and really making time for the things that fill your cup.
Okay.
Because it's not selfish.
Right.
A lot of people think that self-care is selfish. But it's actually essential. You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's true.
So if you're depleted and you're not taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
you have nothing to give to others.
Right. And I find like when I do take time for myself, then I'm more creative and productive.
Exactly.
So maybe I need to like rethink my self-care strategy.
Yeah.
Less about like, the pampering and more about like filling my cup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And speaking of filling your cup or depleting it,
Uh-huh.
sometimes we need to let go of the things that are weighing us down.
Which brings us to letting go of grudges, which I think a lot of people struggle with. I know I do.
Yeah, me too.
Like sometimes it feels so justifiable to hold on to that anger.
Right.
You know what I mean? I do. And one of the sources said that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Oh.
It hurts us way more than it hurts the other person.
Right. But what about accountability?
Yeah.
Like, what if the other person, deserves an apology? Or,
Oh, for sure.
shouldn't they be accountable for their actions?
Yes, accountability is important, but what
Yes.
forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the burden of that anger. It doesn't mean that you're saying what they did was okay
Okay.
or that you condone it,
Right.
but it's about releasing yourself from the weight of it. And one of the sources said that it's a gift you give yourself.
Okay, so you're not letting the other person off the hook.
Exactly.
You're just
You're choosing to move on.
choosing to move on without carrying that.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good way to reframe it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about comparison, self-care, grudges. What about this overthinking monster that seems to be lurking around the corner for a lot of us?
Oh my gosh, it's such a beast. Principle number 4 is tame the overthinking monster. I mean, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information, we're always on our phones, it's so easy to get in that spiral of worry.
Oh, I'm like the champion overthinker, I think.
Uh-huh.
Especially before a big presentation or something.
Oh, yeah.
My mind just goes into overdrive and I'm thinking of every worst case scenario
Oh, for sure.
that could possibly happen.
Yeah. So the sources actually had some really good techniques for managing overthinking.
Okay.
And one that stood out to me was thought labeling. So when you notice yourself spiraling, you just acknowledge it and say, okay, this is a worry thought. This is an anxious thought.
Okay.
And it kind of helps you create some distance from it and not get so swept away.
Oh, like you're observing the thought rather than being in the thought.
Exactly. And mindfulness is another big one. Even just taking a few minutes to focus on your breath can really help you calm that mental chatter and just bring yourself back to the present moment.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into principle number 5,
It does.
which is validate your emotions, which resonated with me because I tend to like push down uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah,
Like I'll just be like, nope, not feeling that right now.
I do that too.
But the sources really emphasize the importance of acknowledging and accepting all of your emotions.
Even the yucky ones.
Yeah, even the negative ones.
Yeah,
Because suppressing them can actually lead to bigger problems down the road.
exactly.
And one of the sources talked about emotional literacy. Like, you know, you're literate and you can read.
Yeah.
It's learning how to identify and express your emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah, like expanding your emotional vocabulary.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times we just have like happy, sad, mad.
Right.
But there's so many nuances to our emotions. And it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Right.
Experiencing negative emotions doesn't mean you're failing at life.
Right.
It's just part of being human. The key is developing healthy coping mechanisms. So whether that's journaling, talking to a therapist, or engaging in activities that bring you joy.
Yes. So be kind to yourself, acknowledge your emotions, let
Yeah.
go of the things that are not serving you. And then there's this pressure to be perfect,
Yes.
which, let's be honest, nobody is.
Nobody is, and it's actually an unattainable goal. And I love that the sources really highlight this. Principle number 6 is that perfection is a myth.
Yes.
And one of the sources described it as a self-imposed prison. We set these impossible standards for ourselves, and then we beat ourselves up when we don't meet them.
Yeah, because you're never going to meet them.
You're never going to meet them.
Because the goalpost keeps moving.
Exactly. So it's this constant cycle of striving and never feeling good enough.
Right. So how do we get out of that cycle?
Well, one of the things the sources highlighted was focusing on progress over perfection.
Okay.
So rather than saying, I have to be perfect, it's I'm learning and I'm growing
Okay.
and celebrating the effort and the journey, not just the outcome.
Yeah. That's so much healthier, I think. And speaking of journeys, life is a journey.
It is.
And there's a lot of twists and turns,
So many.
which is why it's so important to embrace change, which is principle number 7.
Oh, it is so key.
Yeah. And one of the sources I found really insightful, they compared us to trees in a storm. The rigid tree snaps, but the one that bends with the wind survives.
Oh, that's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
And there's research that shows that adaptability is actually linked to resilience and even cognitive health.
Mm.
When we resist change, it creates so much stress and tension.
Yeah.
But when we can embrace it as an opportunity for growth,
Yeah.
we become more resilient in the face of challenges.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from self-compassion to letting go to embracing change.
Yes,
It all kind of points to the importance of being present,
it does.
which is our final principle.
Yes, focus on the now.
And it's so easy to get caught up in regrets the past, worries about the future,
Right.
but one of the sources described it as the only reality we truly have.
Yeah, because the past is gone, the future is uncertain, but this moment
Yeah.
is all we can control.
So how do we do that? How do we stay present?
Well, there's lots of different techniques, but one that was mentioned a lot throughout the sources was mindfulness. And it can be as simple as just taking a few minutes to focus on your breath or the sensations in your body or the sounds around you and just bringing yourself back to the here and now.
It's almost like a mini vacation for your mind.
It is.
And the more you practice it, the easier it gets to kind of access that throughout the day.
Totally. It's a skill we can develop with practice.
So that's it for our deep dive into happiness. It's about cultivating self-compassion, letting go of what's weighing us down, embracing change, and focusing on the present moment. A lot to think about there.
It is a lot, and we just kind of scratched the surface, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
Out of all of those principles, what resonates with you the most, and how can you apply it to your life today, even if it's just one small step?
That's a great question to leave everybody with. Until next time, keep exploring.
Yes.